Hello and welcome to the next lesson of Cylinder Radio. I'm your host, Will Roosh, and I am revisiting a recent topic because I think it's really important, and I have access to someone who is an expert in this area, and I think it will give a really good perspective that we should hear, and that is on masculinity and Ryan Michler, the creator of Order of Man, which is a podcast and a whole thing that I want him to kind of break down for you a little bit. But we're going to talk about masculinity. And right now, during the COVID-19 thing, with economic, disaster potentially on the way, and health issues, and people really scrambling and struggling, I get reminded of this meme that are the saying, strong men make good times make weak men make hard times, and then hard times make strong men, and kind of that's that cycle of it. So we're going to dive into that and how masculinity and the role that men play in our society, and how that should be adapted and used right now. We're going to go into that. And Ryan, thank you for doing this. We've been trying to align our schedules for a while. I'm so glad to have you here. Can you introduce yourself to the audience? Tell us a little bit about what you do, what Order of Man is, and then we can get into it.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Will. Looking forward to it. I know, like you said, we've been working on it for a while, and you're busy and I'm busy, but this is, in the fallout of this coronavirus thing, it represents an opportunity to focus, to have some more margin and space, and to focus on the things that are important. So I was glad we were able to carve it out. Order of Man is an organization I started 5 years ago with the goal of giving men tools, resources, accountability, conversations they need to become more capable. And we focus in some primary areas, both personally and professionally, but family men, business owners, community leaders, just better men in general. So we've been going strong with a podcast for 5 years now. I think we've interviewed close to 300 men, I want to say we're almost at 600 total podcasts that we've done over 5 years. It's been an interesting ride. We've grown hundreds of thousands of social media followers and men who belong to the order, if you will. And it's just been a really, really interesting ride. There's a lot of accountability built in it for me as well. Like I'm the recipient of what we're doing just as much as anybody else, which is a great honor and obviously tremendously impacted my life. So yeah, we're doing well and just getting started and got a lot of cool things in the works, but here we are 5 years later, going strong.
So that's awesome. So you, would you consider yourself kind of like your background and everything more like blue collar?
No, not really. Blue collar, is that what you said?
Yeah.
No, I mean, I've done some landscaping and electrical work and some trades like that. I was in the military for a little while, but most of my background is in retail management and financial services.
Okay.
So I wouldn't consider myself a blue collar guy, although I resonate with blue collar workers, tradesmen, basically men who are getting after it, whether that's using their mind and sitting behind a computer, or men who are using their hands and their back and their intellect and building physical things. It's I resonate deeply with guys who work hard in one form or the other.
The reason I asked is, well, and you're a soldier, so I guess that would maybe, align with that. But the reason I ask is because I'm from a steel town in Pennsylvania where I grew up. And I live in LA now, which is very different. But
I bet.
What you're doing, and this is a question I bring up when I talk about masculinity, because it's a tricky play when you say like, hey, we're gonna get together and we're gonna do guy stuff, we're gonna teach you how to be a guy. I know you don't do it like that, but that essential is the dudes who are working at the steel mill like Roscoe, or the Marines over in Fallujah or something like that, are like, look, I'm not taking a class on how to be a man. Are you up against that resistance of like what you're doing? How do you navigate what you're doing and you're getting it to resonate with like real, like tough guys, like real guys? But how do you do that in such a way that they're not turned off to it? Because when I have these guys' lunches at my school, and there's a lot of guys who are just like, I don't need to go to a lunch to learn about how to be a dude and blah, 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 blah. Do you know what I'm saying? Like there is that weird balance of like learning. It's supposed to be something that's just innate. If you're a real man, it just comes naturally. how to behave and stuff like that. How do you balance that?
Yeah, I don't really think or perceive what we do as teaching people how to be like a real man.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. If we did it that way and took that approach, a lot of people would be turned off by it. But the approach that we like to take is let us give you the tools and the accountability, the brotherhood. I mean, even going in the military, when these guys leave the military, their brotherhood goes away. So let us give you access to the toolbox that you need to become more capable. And every man wants that. And when I'm talking about capability, I'm talking about fatherhood, for example. Like every man, like there's no man out, I should say, there's very few men out there who are dads, who are fathers, who aren't interested in becoming a better father, or who own a business or are an employee and they're not interested in furthering their career pursuits, or they're not interested in improving their health and their stamina and their strength. Like every single man is interested in that. So again, it's not about telling you like, oh, a real man does this. It's about, hey, here's some things that we do well. Here's some strengths that we have generally as men. Here's some tools and resources and conversations and accountability that will help you live a more fulfilled, profitable, successful, meaningful life. And that angle, I think, has kept it from, let me tell you exactly what you should be doing. Because who am I to say that,
Yeah.
right? Like, I mean, I fall short on just about every front at times, just like anybody else. So, yeah, I don't put myself on some pedestal and wave my finger at guys and say, you should be doing this and that. It's like, hey, here's some tools that have worked well for me. Here's the path I'm on. If you want to walk it with me and we'll do this as brothers, let's do it. If you're not interested in that, well, that's fine too. Carry on.
Yeah, I guess what it'd be is asking for help, because when I present this to like kids in LA, like they want to be handy. They don't know how to change a tire. They don't know how to change oil or brakes or anything like that. They don't know how to drive a stick shift, but they know that knowing how to drive a stick shift is cool. But like their dads don't know, and no one knows. So like I've taught several kids how to do that, or like I've been doing jiu-jitsu for a long time, and like when I would have kids when I taught in like the hood, who they were getting in fights all the time. And I was like, you guys get in fights all the time? They're like, yeah. I was like, why don't you be better at fighting then? Like, you're not
Right.
very good at this. And
Yeah.
they're like, well, I don't know. Like, it's not something you really ask for. I think they're scared to ask for help on how to change tires, or how to grapple or throw a punch, or how to, like wire a light switch. I think it's the asking for help. How do you make it comfortable enough where a guy can ask for help and he doesn't feel like, like less than, he doesn't feel weak for not knowing, because there's so many things that we don't know, but you have to be humble enough to essentially be a white belt in electrician work, and be a white belt when it comes to hunting or shooting a bow or whatever all that is. How do you make that comfortable for them?
I think you just hit on it. The framing that we use is humility, guys. Like, and actually, that will help you become stronger. See, the language of empathy and compassion and kindness, although it's important, isn't something that deeply resonates with a lot of men. But the language of strength and toughness and grit and fortitude and capability and skill sets and battle, that resonates with a lot of men. So the framing that we use is not, hey, let us show you how to be more open and vulnerable and talk about your feelings, because that's going to turn guys off. The language we use is, let's use humility as a tool, as a resource to develop some level of capability or a skill set or some strength in our life. And that reframing of it has really helped us resonate with a lot of men. And I have people ask me like, oh, how do you talk with these guys about opening up and talking about their emotions? Well, I don't say let's open up and talk about our emotions,
Right.
because that actually produces the exact opposite effect. But if I say, hey, you know what? Let's go climb that hill together and let's do it as fast as we can. And then when we're at the top, we'll talk about our experience. Like what went well, what didn't work, where we kind of stumbled, how we could do it better next time. And then all of a sudden you get to the top of the hill and everybody's talking about their emotions and what they experienced, but it wasn't framed in the let's sing kumbaya and hold hands and chant to each other. It's in the context of let's be men in this battle. It's accomplishing the same objective, but it's reframed in a way that's significant and digestible for most men.
Yeah, I think that's something really important is like, and my wife, well, she'll get together with, she has like a group of girls and they get together, whatever it is, like, once a month, or I don't know, every other week. And they just talk. They just talk about how their lives are. And she's like, you guys should do that. It's like, well, we
Guys don't want to do that.
we do it like, but not, and I'm not going to say, hey, let's get together and talk. It has to be through some sort of activity. It's while you're working on cars, you're underneath, you're covered up to your elbows in grease, while you're on the mats, while you're hiking, while you're dragging a deer behind you. You talk, you open up, you talk about what your struggles are, you do, but there is like a common goal. It's not that guys aren't willing to open up. It's just the environment needs to be catered very specifically. But what it's happening this is why I'm glad that you're on here, and I hope teachers are listening to this who are struggling with male students, is we're trying to push the more, and I don't know if this is accurate, but the more feminine version of that, of let's just sit around in a circle and talk about our emotions. They're trying to push that on.
Yeah, that's entirely accurate.
Yeah.
I mean, that's entirely accurate. That's the correct way to look at it. And it's, by the way, it's not meant as a knock. It's just that boys need to learn from other men. And did I lose you there for a minute?
Not the audio, just a little bit of it. Okay.
Okay, all right. Yeah, boys need to learn from other men. This isn't a knock against women at all. But if you look at the school system, it's predominantly women, right? So it's no wonder that our boys are going to grow up in an environment where they think that that's what they're supposed to do. And then school teachers and institutions and even the medical community are looking at these young boys and asking, what in the world is going wrong? Well, we're treating them like girls. If you look at Dr. Leonard Sachs and Dr. Warren Farrell's work, Dr. Leonard Sachs wrote many books, but the two that really stood out to me based on the work I do is Why Gender Matters and Boys Adrift. And then Dr. Warren Farrell wrote a book called The Boy Crisis. And it actually talks about how the school system is stacked against our young men. It's been shown that women connect when physically they're face-to-face, right? They're face-to-face, they're talking to each other, and they're working through whatever it is they're working through. Men work best when they're shoulder to shoulder. So outward facing a common objective or a common enemy, and then working in unison towards that objective or against that enemy. So if you take that framework and the dynamic of how generally women and men operate, then you can see that the school system, which is face-to-face, right? Teacher, children, face-to-face, isn't as beneficial for our young men. They need to go out into the environment, whether that's outside or even in the classroom, and experience learning, not talk about learning. Experience it towards a common objective or against a common enemy.
Absolutely. And that's why I think a lot of teenagers, teenage boys, they connect with their coaches more so than their math teacher. Is because,
of course, we're on the same team, we're working against that team.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like that. The concept of like nice guys finish last. I have an issue. I don't think it's nice guys finish last. I think it's like harmless guys maybe, or something like along those lines. Like I have this concept that I want to run by, get your thoughts on. This idea that bad guys, like the bad guys in society, are actually weak guys. Is that it's
right.
The weak ones who can't confront things, that do surreptitious stuff behind people's backs and things like that. And when we're making boys into being some sort of, we're weakening them in certain ways. We're actually making them into more, archetypical like villains. What are your ideas on that? Does that resonate?
Yeah. Well, here's one of the things that I think we lost generally the ability to do when it comes to social media is understand nuance and context. So when somebody says, for example, nice guys finish last, then people will interpret that as like, well, I mean, nice guy, we want people to be nice. Okay, well, we're not talking about being kind. When you say nice guys finish last, we're not talking about it being a kind, decent human being. We're talking about being weak, cowardly, and pathetic. So you have to yes, we're using the word nice, and that can be interpreted in different ways. So when we're having discussion like this, we have to make sure that we're using the term and then we're accurately defining the term before we start talking about the rest of it. So when you say nice guys finish last, it doesn't mean kind. It doesn't mean respectful or chivalrous. It doesn't mean that. It means weak, pathetic, cowardly, scared, passive. That's what we mean when we say nice guys finish last. There's another good book by, um, the name escapes me now, but the book is called No More Mr. Nice Guy. And again, he's not talking about being, he's not saying that men should be jerks.
Right.
He's saying that they should be bold and assertive and decisive and strong and tough. Oh, and by the way, that's not at odds with being a kind, decent human being. I can be an assertive, bold, strong man and also be kind and empathetic and caring, but I'm not a passive guy. I'm not a weakling. I'm not going to get bulldozed or railroaded by other people, but that doesn't make me not kind. It just means I'm assertive and bold in what I want and what I'm going after.
Yeah, I think we have to give, young people the kind of slack to figure that out. But, it's like you can, help people be capable, help the little lady across the street or with their groceries or whatever it is. Like all of these things, be kind, stand up to the kid who's being bullied. You stand up and you say, leave that kid alone. Like that guy's not going to finish last. That's the person that's what's more kind than that. It's the kid who's, like scared and doesn't get involved because he doesn't want to,
right,
rattle anything. That's the kid who's gonna finish last, so to speak. But I mean, I think even women are.
Well, Will, can I challenge one thing you said there? You said we have to give them slack to figure it out, and I think I agree to some level that you need to let children figure things out, and you need to let them experience the weight and the consequences of their decisions. But I would say that we need to be more assertive as men in helping them understand that. There's a proverb that says, and I think it's an African proverb that says, the boys must be initiated or they'll burn the village down. And so it isn't about giving them slack. It's about giving them guidance and direction and instruction by other men who know what it means to be a man. Those are the men that need to step into these young men's lives and speak to them and teach them and hold them accountable to their what they say and what they do, and allow them to experience the weight of the decisions that they're making, both positively and negatively. So I think it requires a more assertive, active role than we've seen in a lot of men over the past, 50, 60, 70, maybe even 100 years, as men left the homesteads and went out into the workforce and left behind little Timmy and little Tommy. So it's something that we need to return to. And we have opportunities to do that by working at home and being more involved and present and hyper efficiency with our economies. We're very primed to be able to do that as men.
So that gets us into the importance of male role models. I had Matt Thornton on from SVG Gym on here talking about, he had just a whole bunch of stats about, because this was right around the time of the Gillette commercial and toxic masculinity, which I'm sure people brought up to a million times, that it's not bad fathers in the home, which is definitely a thing, 100%, but it's more the lack of, is not having a positive, or just to say positive male, not having a positive male role model. The effects are huge. And I've seen it just teaching in all different kinds of communities. When someone has a strong male role model in the house, could be a dad, could be an uncle, could be an older brother, they are on a much better path to success. That needs to be somewhat scalable, because how do we start this where it's such a problem? I mean, the absent father, the single parent household rate with absent fathers is atrocious in many American communities. How do we as a society put more emphasis? Is it putting hey, you gotta step up, you gotta be more responsible, like not giving excuses for people like, oh, well, it was too hard for them to stay with the family? Is it that kind of stuff? Is it like tough love? I mean, what are your thoughts on the importance of male role models, and how do we make a shift in our society toward that?
Well, a couple of things that come up right off bat is we need to honor the nuclear family. That's like the biggest answer right there. We need to honor the nuclear family. Honor the fact that I think every child deserves the opportunity and the right to have a mother and the father in the home. And if we aren't willing to honor or even acknowledge that, then is it any wonder why we see uh, homes that are continually increasing without fathers in those homes? And then you look at the family court system and it's stacked against men. You know, the majority of kids in divorce and custody battles go to women, and men are ostracized, and men are dictated through government action, their role or their involvement in their children's lives. And then a lot of the times women are actually perpetuating some of that. And again, I'm not saying that women are the enemy. I'm just saying that that happens. And unless we learn to honor the nuclear family, we're going to continue to see more of this. Of course, children are being born out of wedlock. That's a recipe for dad not being around. We know that. That's controversial, but it shouldn't be. You just look at the data. More and more kids are being born out of wedlock. Less and less people are deciding to get married, which, regardless of what you think of marriage, there's certainly an element of commitment to it. So you could say marriage or commitment. I don't really care, but it does illustrate some degree of enhanced commitment. Okay. Now, outside of that, we need to honor men, not undermine them, not ridicule them, not look at them as the enemy, not assume that that masculinity is inherently toxic. And people say, well, nobody actually believes that. Well, that's not true, because I've seen countless articles that actually in the title say masculinity is toxic.
Yeah.
I've also seen the study from the American Psychological Association in 2018, which suggested that the characteristics that are traditionally looked at as masculine, which they specifically named aggression, dominance, competitiveness, and stoicism, are inherently destructive to young men. Well, that's not true at all. Competition actually breeds growth and progress and expansion. Stoicism, you're telling me that to teach a young man how to understand his emotions and then use them as measurements to produce effective results in his life is a negative thing? Because that's what stoicism is. Or you're telling me that even aggression, and I'm not talking about violence here or unbridled violence. I'm talking about aggression. I'm talking about focus and discipline and grit and seeing an objective and doing all that you can to achieve it. You're telling me that's inherently destructive? This is the narrative that's being painted by governments, by even a lot of times the school systems, and also through increasingly the medical community via the American Psychological. This is the same organization that is dictating treatment options and plans and strategies for our young men. So what happens if you have a young boy in the school system who's a little rambunctious, a little rowdy, and can't really seem to focus? And by the way, it's not a focus issue, it's an attention issue. He can focus just fine on things he's interested in, right? So it's an attention issue. What happens when that little boy doesn't do what he's supposed to do? Sit down, shut up, color within the lines. He's highly medicated until he's docile and he's a little cog in the wheel and doing what he's supposed to be doing. And then we determine, oh, now he's healthy. I'd actually consider that unhealthy, because he's got all this pent up rage and aggression and testosterone coursing through his veins, and now he doesn't have an effective outlet. We've turned the light switch off, and now he's just a ticking time bomb. So, there's a lot of problems here that need to be unpacked, but I think it starts with honoring the nuclear family. I think it starts with honoring the men in general, and then recognizing that masculinity isn't in and of itself inherently toxic. In fact, if anything, it's actually positive. It's a great force for good in most people's lives.
Yeah, you said so much there that I want to kind of just like recap, because I agree with you in so many ways. The court system, that's a perfect example of female privilege. Is women overwhelmingly get, or even in a divorce, it's very hard for like a man to get alimony or something like that. But the social justice element, I've had James Lindsay on the podcast. I work with Heterodox Academy and things like that. Like the social justice element of what you brought up from the American Psychological Association, that is such a deep problem, because now it's corrupted the universities, and there is quote unquote evidence to point to support these bad ideas. But reality bats last. And when you when you are saying that aggression or competitiveness or things like that are bad, like you just don't understand what you're doing, the ripple effects of this, it's like guns. Let's just use guns. Guns are something powerful. Wealth is something powerful. Wealth is not evil. Wealth in the wrong hands, used for the wrong thing, is. Same with a gun, and same with aggression and power. Is the answer is not to get rid of it, because you can't. But what you can do is steer it towards good, because the same aggression that could cause someone to, smack his wife around or something evil like that is also perhaps shifted a different way. The aggression that gets a fireman to kick in a door and run into a burning house.
Yeah, I mean, let's take power and wealth. They're amoral. There is no morality in either one of those things.
But they're not presented that way, right? I agree with you.
Which is crazy, because it's an inanimate object without a conscience, without a thought process. Like, it's amoral. It's neither good nor bad. It's just us wielding the tool to produce positive outcomes or negative outcomes. And people will say that. They'll say, well, yeah, that's what we're saying. Toxic masculinity. It's the use of masculinity in a way that's destructive. I wouldn't limit that to masculinity. I mean, you don't ever hear anybody talking about toxic femininity. Right? Now, I might say there's some level of immaturity. Sure. When I was a young man and a boy, like, I was immature. I did stupid things, but that's just a level of maturity. I don't think that has anything to do with masculinity. So the idea of toxic masculinity, just the fact that we have to debate so much about what it even means, is part of the problem. Because some people believe it means this and other people believe it means this, and nobody can come to a general consensus, and we're all kind of disagreeing. That goes back to what we were talking about earlier. We have to actually discuss from some fundamental agreement on the terms and the terminology that we're using, and nobody knows what toxic masculinity is. Some people use it to be undermining of masculinity in general. Some people mean, it just is using toxic or using masculinity in a negative way, and nobody knows what each other's talking about. So let's just not use that term and use something that's more appropriate that we can all agree on.
Yeah, I want to talk about that in a second. I do want to go back to when you said about the nuclear family. Is one of the arguments, because I dance in these culture wars way too much, and one of the things that gets brought up is there is a real straw man argument that's always presented, like, so you're telling me that it's better to have an abusive, alcoholic mom and dad than a wonderful, loving, lesbian parents who are very active in their kids' lives. It's like, no, that's not what we're saying.
No.
Like, come on, like why let's use the ideal. The ideal should be something to aim toward, and we're going to miss it. And that doesn't mean there can't be wonderful single dads, wonderful single moms, all of that kind of stuff. Let's not play the straw man game, because I could just hear people like in the audience just being like, oh, well, what about, I was raised by a single mom. And it's like, that's not what you're saying.
Right. These are people who, frankly, are being intellectually dishonest. Obviously, any rational human being would interpret what I said as not that, because here's what people say. Well, I grew up with just a mom, which, by the way, I did. My mom raised me on her own, and I feel like I turned out pretty okay. So I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm saying ideally, here's what we would strive for. And in a great situation, we'd have a mom and a dad. Both would be committed to each other. Both would be committed to little Tommy and little Susie. They would be engaged. They would care about their children. They would care about their own level of success so they could shine as an example. And there are exceptions to that. And in the absence of a great situation, people can make some wonderful choices and do some wonderful things. But I'm saying ideally, that's what we should be striving for.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it's just important to clear that up for people that's not innate for them to see it the way you explained it. When we talk about toxic masculinity, wonder if it would be, what about the term, if we're like, is a more accurate term misguided masculinity? Because we think about like, it's cheating, it's fighting, it's drunkenness, it's hurting people, is using the testosterone flowing through your brain, through your body, instead of working it out in a gym, or working it out, like saving people, fighting as a soldier or a firefighter or something like that, working hard to advocate for helping communities, using that for wrongs. Like, is it a misguided? Would that be a better way to put it, maybe?
I would just call it human nature. Like, Like we're all of us, men, women, everybody, we're all capable of being spiteful, wanting revenge, wanting to hurt people. Now, the way that generally we may go about doing it might be different based on your sex, but we all lie, we all cheat, we all shortcut, we all steal, we all take advantage of, we all manipulate, and we all do that. So it's not anything exclusive to masculinity, it's just in our nature. And masculinity is actually the thing that helps straighten that out. Femininity is actually the thing that helps straighten that out. You know, my wife, for example, as she's, her and I are raising our daughter. We have one daughter and three boys. My wife is teaching my daughter how to be a lovely woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm supporting her in that. And I'm teaching my boys how to be strong, capable men. And my wife supports me in that. But it is human nature is not exclusive to one sex. It's just who we are. And every day we have to fight against that by having those people in our lives that we admire, that we respect. We need to learn, we need to apply, we need to mess up and then connect the dots between our inaction or our mess ups and the consequences that come from it. I just don't assign it a sex. I
I
just
guess
say it's either immaturity or human nature.
because I'm thinking like with testosterone, especially because I deal with 10th graders, 11th graders, 12th graders. So when they start getting this increased aggression and testosterone, is like, where does this go? And sometimes it becomes just like you said, it goes to, I got to get out of this classroom. I don't want to just sit here and learn from this person talking in front of the room. I got to get out. I got to move. I got to do this. Horny all the time, or maybe, or I want to just run, or I want to smash stuff. Like growing up, I would like spend time building a model and then just smash it, like the smashing element. Like what do you smash? Like that's so innate to boys, is like the want to smash things. And I wonder if we should just be like, well, here's what you do with that. Like you have these tools, this toolbox when you're becoming a man. Here's ways that you can use it that'll benefit you, benefit your family and your community, and then benefit society as a whole.
Yeah, it takes men to do that. I mean, that's as simple as I can say it. I mean, we can get down to specific tactics, but it takes men to understand that. Like a woman will never understand the degree to which testosterone is coursing through a young man's veins and what it does to his mind and his body and soul. She'll never understand it. Just like I'll never understand the levels and the dose of estrogen coursing through a young woman's veins and causing her to do and say and think and believe the things that she does. I'll never understand that, which is why we need strong women, why we need strong men to lead these children to harness everything that is good about masculinity and femininity and produce effective outcomes for ourselves and the people that we care about. Specifically, sports is a great avenue. It's a wonderful avenue, whether we're talking about a solo sport like jiu-jitsu or wrestling or tennis, or or golf, or we're talking about a team sport like football or baseball or track and some of these other things. I mean, competitive sports actually, I think, shaped a lot of the way and who I was as a young man. Without that, I would have had a much more difficult time because I didn't have a permanent father figure in my home. And I learned a lot of what it meant to be a man through playing sports, being around other boys, learning how to interact, learning how to compete, learning how to win and lose, coaches holding us to task, yelling at us at times, being disappointed in us, having pride and excitement for what we did, and the whole range of emotions that we experience when we win and lose and
Yeah.
struggle and all
So
that.
just to kind of wrap it up and give my audience some real concrete things that they can go from here. Um, what would be some tips on where to start from this? Let's say that you are a classroom teacher, or you are a single mom, or you are a dad who doesn't know, who's never been hunting and never did sports. You were talking about sports. I never played sports growing up, and like it was a problem that I'm seeing now, and so I'm got my kid doing stuff. But what are some tips that you can give that are very practical, whether it's in the home, in the classroom, individuals who are listening, young men who are listening that are just like, I'm struggling. Everyone thinks I'm just like, I'm harmless. I'm not a real man. People think I'm gay all the time, all that kind of stuff. Like what what kind of advice can you give to them? Some tips that are practical that they can implement.
So there's so many demographics here that we're talking about, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But generally, what I would say, the answer, the singular answer, and then we'll break it down from there. The singular answer is get around more men. That is the answer. If a young man is feeling like he's less of a man or doesn't know how to be a man or insecure in who he is, then the answer is to get involved, for example, in team sport or some sort of men's program, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Boy Scouts, Trail Life USA, these types of things. Get around other men. If there's a teacher who's listening, a female, let's say, a female teacher who's listening, or a single mother who's listening, the answer is get your boys around other men through competitive sports, coaching, mentoring. There's military programs. I have a cousin, for example, who, when he was in high school, joined an organization. I believe it was called Devil Dogs, which was it was not part of the Marine Corps, but it was almost like Marine Corps training. So he knew he wanted to be a Marine. Obviously, when he's still in high school, he can't join the Marines. So this Devil Dogs program, if I remember correctly, is somewhat of like an ROTC type program for those in high school. He went through the Devil Dog program. He graduated. He ended up going back another year as a Devil Dog instructor, and now he's joined the Marines. He's in boot camp right now.
So do you think?
So
So do you think? Well, just should it be structured? Because there are a lot of bad men out there that if mom's new boyfriend, it's like, all right, well, here, go hang out with Charlie, and
oh,
he's
of course. Yeah.
like, how do
Yeah,
you?
of course. I think that's kind of, I mean, I hope that goes without saying, is like, don't let him go join a gang. Like, that's not what I'm
Yeah, well,
suggesting.
like that might be who they have around them though. Like, how do you
Yeah.
find?
So it's our responsibility to then, like, let's take teachers, for example. If you're a teacher, a male, a man, and you see, I'm sure you do, that there is a lack of fathers in the home or these young men's lives, and I believe that you have a moral obligation to set up some sort of structure to be able to serve these young men, whether that's some sort of extracurricular activity or once a month there's a certain thing, and obviously you'd have to talk with the administration on this, but once a month you have the boys do a lunch for just the young men in the school, and you cover topics about masculinity. The problem is that there's going to be people who complain about that because they're going to say, well, you're just trying to exclude young women. No, not all. I actually think young women should have their own things too, that are separate from what the young men are doing, right? So if you recognize that there is a need, then you have a moral obligation to rectify it. If you're by the way, if you're a school teacher and you're a woman, then you ought to be championing these causes that the male school teachers are trying to do. You ought to stand behind them, because I'll tell you what, if you can stand behind those men in your school system who are trying to do these things, the boys that they're going to impact are going to be better students for you. They're
Yes.
going to perform better, and obviously they're going to live a greater life, which is your goal. Like, I genuinely believe that men and women, school teachers, the vast overwhelming majority of them do so in order to serve the youth. And if you truly wanted to serve the youth, in a way, you might think that you need to get out of your own way for a minute and your own feelings and think that maybe these young men need a male influence and you can support that. Or maybe the young women need a female influence and you can support that. But we need to help each other and work together. We're not at odds with each other. We're not enemies.
When I started these guys' lunches, I had a couple of girls, like senior, junior girls, come up. They're like, "How come you're doing this for the guy?" Blah 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 blah. And I was like, "I'm doing this. You're gonna thank me if I'm doing this right. You're gonna thank me, because the goal
Completely.
better dudes that you have access to." Like that.
Right.
Yeah. Like you should. Yeah. You're exactly right. This is gonna, hopefully, if we do it right, it's gonna benefit them. I'm sure the men who are in your programs and stuff like that, follow your stuff, is like, the idea would be that the women in their lives are like, oh, he's better off now. He's better. He's better to me. He's happier. Blah, 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 blah. Like, that's, yeah, everyone
We
wins.
have we have this program. It's called the Iron Council, and it's an exclusive brotherhood. We've got about 500 men in that group. And when men join, it's a paid membership, but when they join, I wouldn't say they get pushback from their spouses, but their spouses are like, what is it? Like, I don't get it. And they're a little hesitant. They're like, I don't know about this. And then those men who stick with us for 3 months or 5 months, 6 months, 12 months or longer, eventually their wives become the greatest advocates of the thing that we're doing. So they'll say things like, well, what would your Iron Council brothers say? Right now they're actually holding them to task because they've seen that improvement in their husband, and they want that. They want a healthy outlet and a healthy opportunity. Women want men, and men want women. And anything counter to that is a problem. It's a problem in society, and it's typically perpetuated by women who have been damaged, that haven't dealt with the trauma in a healthy way. And by the way, it could be physical, mental, emotional abuse. It could be the abuse of their father from 30 years ago. And I'm not by any means suggesting or even rationalizing some of those men's actions. I'm just saying that if you have that sort of trauma in your life as a woman, and you think even to the slightest degree that men are the enemy, you haven't fully healed from that trauma, and you haven't compartmentalized a horrific potentially situation to that one individual, and instead you've applied it broadly to an entire sex, 50% of the population. That's not healthy.
Yeah. All right. So that's that. Thank you for breaking that down. I hope that, even some of this stuff, if people are listening, you're like, well, I disagree, but okay, well, that's the whole point of the cylinder radio, is like
Right.
different perspectives here, and that's okay. And you can always, the whole point is to just get exposed to new perspectives and better ideas, to different ideas, for people who are trying to do the best that they can. There are people who might disagree with you who are doing the best that they can, but if they get exposed to your ideas and challenge themselves a little bit, like I'm sure you do that all the time, because if someone challenges you on an idea, you think about it. You think about it sincerely, like maybe I'm wrong, and you get proven wrong. I'm sure, like with your ideas, I get proven wrong all the time, or I change my ideas, I should say, and that's how we get the best ideas. So thank you for
Yeah. Can I
talking
say
about.
one other thing, Will, on that?
Absolutely, please.
Because you talked about changing ideas. I would use the word evolved,
Yeah.
right? Your ideas have evolved, and they've evolved because you have new information. That's it, right? So you make decisions based on the set of data that you have right now. And if new data comes into the equation, then the output's going to change, right? Variables have changed. So I think we need to be careful of saying like, oh, I've changed, because then we could fall into the trap of believing or saying, well, he's wishy-washy, or he flip-flops, or he isn't convicted. No, it just means that I've evolved. And aren't we all trying to evolve? Aren't we all trying to grow and expand? I mean, that's what we're doing for students, right? As teachers, that's what you do. You ought
Suppose.
to do that for yourself as well.
Yeah, I mean, how can you be a lifelong learner if you're not willing to actually learn and,
Yes.
yeah, adapt, evolve, and hopefully your ideas are better. All your ideas, the way you think about controversial issues, are way deeper, more robust than they were, a couple of months ago or a couple of years ago. That's how we just become better as individuals.
Yes.
Absolutely. So, Ryan, where can people see what you're up to, get in touch with you, things like that?
Orderofman.com is our headquarters. You can go check it out over there. Also, since you're listening to a podcast, you can check out our podcast, which is called Order of Man. And then I'm very active on Instagram, which is at Ryan Michler. My last name is Michler. So you'll find us between those three resources.
Absolutely. And I'll put it in the notes and everything like that.
Excellent.
Ryan,
Thank you, man.
thank you for coming on here, sharing what you do. I'm glad we got to do it, and hope to keep in touch.
Thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Take care, man.